Now, most of my stories I can stretch into a 10 to 20 minute tale, but the following are just some quickie tales that deserve some airtime. They're just not long enough for me to stretch out into full stories. I was in 5th grade of Catholic grade school when the rebellion occurred, an uprising so resounding that it resulted in the removal of one single person, permanently. I can't remember how it started, but I knew the cause of the uprising, and how it taught an entire classroom of kids to band together for the greater good. Like I said, I can't remember how it came up, but the Wizard of Oz was introduced into the conversation with our 5th grade teacher, a young, straight-out-of-school woman with bright eyes and high hopes. We were discussing our favorite parts of the classic American staple when the conversation suddenly turned sour. Very sour. Our 5th grade teacher, Mrs. S., admitted that her favorite character in the movie was Belinda. A flurry of "who's?" were volleyed back. "You know, Belinda, the Good Witch of the North." No, it was Glinda, the Good Witch of the North." "No, you're wrong. It's Belinda." Now, this was in the day before the internet or smartphones, and none of us thought of running to the school library to check her facts, but all of us were seriously confused. All 30 of us, seated in these tiny wooden desks, were exhibiting an array of emotions: confusion, betrayal, dismay, and wrath. Comments from, "How could you think it was Belinda?" to, "It says Glinda in the credits," to, "Was it really Belinda and MGM just got it wrong?" to, "My whole life is a lie," scurried about the room within the span of 60 seconds. The uproar was astounding, but we were fairly certain that our teacher was completely wrong. The announcement was made: "Look, I'm the teacher and you are the students, and I am teaching you that it was Belinda, the Good Witch of the North." Wait a minute, this was math class. What does Mr. Baum's collective works have to do with geometry? It was time to act, and act quickly. After class, a flurry of whispers were passed about, all concerning how to prove Miss S wrong. And the next day, the battle began. The kids brought in books and highlighted Glinda's name. They brought in movie posters, trinkets, documentation, all evidence pointing that the Good Witch of the North's name was Glinda. Each exhibit was immediately dismissed. "Nope, that's a typo. Nope, that's a misprint. Nope, you just changed that." Then Miss S finally had enough. "Look, I am the teacher. I'm right, you're wrong. That's final." Wrong thing to say to a bunch of kids that love the Wizard of Oz. A few weeks later, Miss S gave us a pop quiz on various things we had learned prior. The final question of the exam was a multiple choice and worth 50% of our quiz grade. What was the name of the Good Witch of the North in The Wizard of Oz? A. Glonda, B. Belinda, C. Melinda, or D. Glida? I looked around the room to see a sea of wrathful 5th graders who never had a malicious thought in their tiny heads, but were now filled with so much hatred that I was sure Miss S would get stabbed with a pencil later that day. But when you put that much stock into the fact that you're right, you better be right, and never give the opposition a chance to prove you wrong. We all answered the question, E. Glinda, and subsequently, all failed the test. Straight-A students had their perfect records tarnished. Individuals who had never seen a giant letter F on a paper handed back to them now knew what it felt like. And it was school policy that if you failed an assignment, test, or exam, it was to be brought home and signed by your parents, which is exactly what we planned for. The days following were absolutely glorious. Parents called the school demanding an explanation of such trivial material on an exam that held such a high percentage of their child's grade. Inquiries were held, discussions were had, and it was decided that Miss S had grossly abused her position. She was forced to issue a public apology, recant all quiz results, and later that year was not invited back to teach again at our school. We like to think she went back to Oz to tend to her flying monkeys. Mr. Lowell Corwin was my American history teacher in high school and has won the Best Teacher Award for years running, and his name should be held in the highest respect. He has long since retired, and I hope he is doing well. His attitude towards idiots has had a lasting impression on me, and so I thank you, Mr. Corwin, for your talent and creative ways of not taking shit from anyone. U.S. history was the first class of the day, and for the most part, pretty uneventful. Most of us teenagers weren't awake yet and simply didn't have the energy to fuck around in class. Mr. Corwin made damn sure that no one would fool around in his class, and his technique is the same technique that I use when parenting my son. Start off with a strict set of rules and enforce them. As the class learns these rules and respects and obeys them, then you can ease up off the hammer simply because you won't have to enforce them. They will be learned and most likely second nature. For 99% of the class, that was the case. We all enjoyed the way Mr. Corwin taught American history because he lived through some of it. He would tell us personal accounts of when Nixon resigned, what it was like to watch the moon landing on TV. He even had a fantastic tale about a field trip his and another teacher's class took to the University of Wisconsin-Madison right after the Kent State shootings, and how their field trip got stuck in the middle of a riot, and the adventure they had trying to get back home with all of the kids in tow. He made history interesting, which is one of the reasons I love our country's history so much. But there's always someone. That one person in your class that just doesn't care or just doesn't get it. She made the mistake of sitting in the front row on the first day of class and quickly regretted that decision. Her lack of respect for Mr. Corwin and the rest of the class quickly became an issue, and Mr. Corwin did not hesitate to make an example of how serious he was with his classroom regulations. I can't remember one solid week where she wasn't sent to the office at least once. Well, that was until Mr. Corwin got her, and got her good. On a Monday, not any different from any other Monday, this Queensryche fan decided it would be a good idea to take a cat nap in the middle of Mr. Corwin's lesson. That would have been fine if she simply propped her head up with her hand and wore sunglasses, but she wasn't that bright. She simply laid her head down in her folded arms on top of her desk. What made matters worse is that she snored. Mr. Corwin was smooth about it. As he continued to teach the class, he snuck to the back of the room and grabbed the thickest textbook he could get his hands on. We were all excited, sensing what was about to transpire, but we did our best to keep quiet and let Mr. Corwin execute his scheme. He crept back up to the front of the classroom and held the book a good foot or two above the purple-haired girl's desk, and finished his explanation of why the Louisiana Purchase was a good thing for America by slamming the gargantuan tome down on her desk with a resounding crack. She shot upright so fast that she fell out of her desk. The noise was so loud, in fact, other teachers on the floor peeked into the classroom and wondered who was firing a gun. Mr. Corwin helped the girl back to her feet and sent her to the office with some words of encouragement. "This is the last time you will screw off in my class. The next time I have to send you to the office, you will automatically fail, and I will drop you like a bad habit. Do I make myself clear?" As she left the room for the last time, we cheered and gave the coolest teacher we knew a standing ovation. You've all heard stories about people quitting their jobs in glorious fashion, and you secretly hope you can pull off something that smooth, but the end usually comes in one of two ways for most. You part ways civilized, or you're fired. Very rarely do you get to leave on your own terms and give a dose of their own medicine to those who wronged you. I'm a web designer by trade, and I would not have gotten where I am today if it were not for my brothers in arms at a small independent web hosting and development company in southeastern Wisconsin. The site was an old baker's square, and it was nestled on the outskirts of the downtown city of where I live today. The company was run by two brothers and one friend of theirs. The elder brother handled the computer repair portion of the business, the friend handled the financial aspect of the business, and the younger, hot-headed, ego-strong brother ran the web development and sales portions. Now, I will give this man credit. He could sell anything. You could spray paint a turd with gold paint and he would be able to sell it for $5,000 that same day. But he knew little to nothing about web design, which is why he had an entire staff of young professionals such as myself. There were database technicians, programmers, SEO specialists, content managers, and design specialists, which I was one of. And we, without the influence of any other aspect of the company, whether it was another department or management, could function quite efficiently on our own. Some of the most brilliant guys I have ever had the privilege to work with were jammed into a 20-foot by 20-foot room, no windows and no lights except for the glow of the monitors. We called it the cave. I still converse with some of those folks to this day over the connections we had, and one of the strongest bonds we had was our intolerable hatred and disrespect for the gentleman at the helm, the younger of the two brothers. He was known as an all-around douchebag. He would lead with fear and intimidation rather than by example. It wouldn't be a complete day unless he unloaded his ammo into one of the unsuspecting employees that just happened to be his target for the day. He would yell, insult, belittle, demean, flick earlobes, and that was on a good day. He would get so loud sometimes that everyone would have to stop what they were doing until he would just shut up, because no one could concentrate when he got started. He was loud, obnoxious, overbearing, and wore shiny green suits on occasion, which only reminded me of the homosexual bar owner in Good Morning Vietnam, home of the shiny green suits. Now, I had been on the receiving end of his wrath a few times, but never anything too serious. When my wife and I got engaged, I let all my friends at work know that, plus the fact that she was pregnant. We didn't get married because she was pregnant, we just moved the date up. Everyone was happy for me, and occasionally they would ask how my fiancé was doing with the pregnancy, and all that, to which I would start up a conversation. More or less, the conversation would have to end due to the boss marching into the cave and yelling, "Why are you not working? I'm paying you to work. Shut the fuck up and get back to work." And then he'd turn around and start a conversation with someone in the room. All of us under our breath would curse at him and hope one day for the chance to really shut him up. Several months into my soon-to-be wife's pregnancy, the boss came to my station and sat down. "Hey, I got a question for you." "Sure, what's up?" "How long would it take you to redesign a website?" "Well, what website needs redesigning? What all needs to go into it?" "I'm not rebuilding it, so I don't know. That's why I'm asking you." "Well, there are some details that need to be based out before I can answer that correctly. Is it just a redesign, or are you adding things to it? Am I just reskinning it, or am I starting from the ground up, or am I asked you a question, and I want an answer." "Well, I can't answer you until you let me know everything that I'll be doing." "Jesus fuck, how useless are you? I asked a simple question, you can't give me a simple answer? Why the fuck did I even hire you? But you need to get your fucking priorities straight if you're gonna last here much longer." "Well, At that point, he stormed out of the room, leaving everyone to stare at me, all with the same expression. What the fuck just happened? He then stormed back into the room and pointed a fat finger at me. "You need to learn how to make solid decisions, kid. You're gonna be a horrible father," and stormed back out. Are you fucking kidding me? I just stood there in shock for the next 5 minutes, as did everyone else. I immediately started smacking myself internally for not recording the entire thing, because I knew I would have owned a web development company after I was done suing his ass for this level of harassment. But alas, I only had a flip phone while everyone else was enjoying their smartphone experience. Several of my cohorts patted me on the back and offered their condolences after I sat back down. He didn't mean it. He was way out of line. Just forget that he said it. When trying to make your point in an argument, you do not bring anyone's personal life into the fray. And it didn't even matter that he made a piss-poor attempt to apologize, the kind without actually saying, "I'm sorry for saying that." What he said was said, and he couldn't unsay it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I had taken this job as just a way to pay my bills, and I knew this wouldn't be my final leg of the career race. I was already putting my feelers out there for new employment, but at that point, I made my search 10 times as aggressive. 4 months and a new son later, I get a phone call from a recruiter with a very large and prestigious company in the Milwaukee area, and they would like to interview me for a graphic designer position in the marketing department. I interviewed with the hiring manager, and before I even got back to my old post at this hole-in-the-ground company, I found out that I got the job. This being Friday, I decided to hold on to the information until Monday, when I would put in my official notice. It also gave me time to fuck with that son of a bitch so eloquently that I would be able to tell him to go fuck a rusty chainsaw, and he would thank me for the compliment. Monday came and I anxiously awaited for my boss to come into work and scurry into his office. I took a deep breath, walked up to the door and knocked, and in a brash and gruff voice he bellowed, "What the fuck do you want?" I smiled a shit-eating grin and handed him my formal letter of resignation. He snatched it from my hand and, "The fuck is this?" Then he read it. I thought Transformers were more than meets the eye, but this guy went from sharp to minnow in 3 seconds. What? Well, why? Why would you leave us? Why would you want to quit our family? Really? Really, dude? Are you fucking kidding me? I don't have enough time today to list all the reasons that not only should I quit, but sue your douchebag ass. Of course, all of that was internal. I feel that my time here has come to an end and I'm needed elsewhere. But we had so many plans for you here. You can't bail out on us now. This in part was true. I was also their video specialist and shot all of the footage for promotional videos and green screen pieces. They were planning on building an added wing to house a video studio, which would most likely be my new office. Well, those plans just didn't move fast enough, and in that time, I received a better offer. Well, is there anything we can do to change your mind? Is this guy serious? Has he forgotten all the bullshit he has put me through? I did not miss a beat. No. This is just all so sudden. I didn't know you were unhappy here. It wasn't a matter of happiness, I told him. I just needed to make a solid decision. I don't want to be a horrible father, you know. At that moment, he finally caught on. He closed his eyes and placed his hand upon his head. He tried to question why I was only giving him a week's notice, but by now, he knew exactly why I was only giving him 5 days. He didn't deserve the full 2 weeks. I walked back into the cave and gave everyone else the news that I would be finishing out the week, and then I would be moving on to a new position outside the company, to which was received with a resounding applause. Yay! Excellent! Good for you! How'd the jackass take it? We all laughed when I told him how we transformed from Goliath into David, and everyone wished me well. The rest of the week went fairly fast, with little incident. The boss tried to be funny, but all I had to do was shoot him a look of, "You done fuck up, boy, and you know it," and he would just shut up. When Friday came, I was greeted with handshakes and hugs as I cleared out my cube and headed out the door for the last time. Out of all of the jobs I have ever had in my life, I am most thankful for that one, for 2 reasons. 1, the guys that actually did the work and were good at it were fantastic people, and like I mentioned earlier, I still talk to some of them to this day. But the other thing that I took from that hellhole was how not to be in charge. There are 2 different types in charge: leaders and bosses. A leader leads by example and helps with the workload for the sake of the project. Bosses boss and try to lead with scare tactics and bullying. They stand back, not contributing, and wonder why their vision isn't being met when they give no constructive input. I now strive to be a leader, and if I ever feel myself begin to stray from that ideal, I just think back to my days in the cave. My very first experience with death was when I was around 3 years old, I think. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was a kind and gentle man, from what I remember. I can actually recall vivid memories of playing catch with him in his backyard whenever we would drive over to his and my great-grandmother's house for a visit. Other than that, not much. I cannot remember the year, and it really doesn't matter when, but he passed away. I can't even remember what he died of. Natural causes, I assume. Just old age. The service is rather fuzzy, but I can clearly remember the reception afterwards. My perspective on the event probably made it more grandiose than it actually was. But in this large room, there were close to 100 people. Friends, old co-workers, family, I had no idea. I had never seen any of these people before, and after this event, never saw them again. Where I was and who was there are not important details of the story, just a bit of viewpoint from an overwhelmed 3-year-old. My mother came up to me and she sat me down, her eyes red from mourning. She asked me to look into her eyes and please pay attention. She very calmly and matter-of-factly asked if I knew where we were. I said I didn't know. Then she proceeded to tell me that Great-Grandpa was dead. Of course, I asked what that meant, and she did her best to explain death to me. The body gets too weak to keep running, so it just shuts down, and there's nothing anyone can do to bring that person back. Everyone has a soul that is the true life force that keeps a person alive, and it holds all of your dreams and thoughts and memories and likes, dislikes, and once that leaves the body, you cannot get it back. It goes on to some other place that no one knows exactly where, but that place is said to be much better and peaceful than here. You mean like heaven, Mommy? Exactly. See, I knew you were a smart boy. She gave me a hug, and that was that. I knew everything I needed to know about death and dying, and I was fine with it. It wasn't a scary thing or anything to be feared. I saw it from that day forward as a transition, like adolescence to adulthood. It was a transition, but in a very different sense of the word. My mother's mother, who witnessed this entire conversation, saw this as reprehensible and outrage. She took my mother aside and scolded her. You can't tell that boy about death. His mind is too fragile to comprehend what's going on. Excuse me, Mom, but I'll be the judge of what my boy can and cannot handle. And as you can plainly see, his mind has not been shattered. You need to give him more credit. He's going to end up smarter than both of us combined. Still, my mother's mother wouldn't have any of it. As I was enjoying some cake my grandpa had fetched me, she sat down beside me and began to talk, very condescendingly. Now don't you worry about a thing, child. Papa's just sleeping, okay? In a cliché moment, I decided to answer her while the rest of the attendees all had a sudden lapse in their conversation. The room's murmur died down as a little boy spoke up, using the only volume setting he had, 15. Gamma, didn't anyone tell you? Papa's dead! My grandpa, who had divorced this woman nearly 20 years, almost choked on his cake to keep from laughing. My mother's mother got all flushed and flustered and turned around to see my mom and great-grandmother both shaking their heads in disappointment. See, Ma? Told ya, my mother concluded. My mother's mother simply got up and left the room full of snickers and giggles as quickly as her legs would allow her, her current husband quickly to follow. The only other thing that I remember of that day was another moment my family would save away in their memory banks. As the day drew to a close, I wanted to see Papa one more time. My mother and great-grandmother were both exhausted, so my grandpa took me to the open casket. I extended my arms and hopped up, but couldn't see into the coffin. I looked at my grandpa with longing eyes, and he immediately knew that I needed a boost. He picked me up, and I leaned in to see the painted face of my late great-grandfather. I looked at the padding inside the elegant coffin and felt the plush and smooth interior. I leaned back and looked at my grandpa. "Okay, I'm done. He's comfy.